It's springtime in Pennsylvania. Flowers are blooming, birds are singing, and there's a smell of smoke in the air. For the Pennsylvania Game Commission, fair weather in between frequent spring showers creates ideal conditions to conduct prescribed burns. But what are prescribed burns, and why are state agencies using them? For the answer, we talk with Assistant Research Professor of Fire and Natural Resource Management, Dr. Jesse Kreye.
So a prescribed burn is a carefully planned burn that's done under specific weather conditions and using specific ignition techniques to safely meet some kind of land management objective.
While prescribed burns can be done at various times throughout the year, a large majority of Pennsylvania are conducted in the spring.
Most burning in Pennsylvania occurs in the spring. There's a window of weather opportunity after the snow melts that the fuels are drying out. There's also, in these hardwood ecosystems, the leaves aren't on the trees yet, so it's allowing the sun to dry out some of the surface fuels to create more of those burn windows.
Despite their proven benefits, prescribed burns have long been underutilized in Pennsylvania.
So some of the barriers to burning, one of them is simply a lack of knowledge and experience with burning. We really haven't been using fire in Pennsylvania for almost 100 years, and although agencies are starting to use it more widely, the capacity to be able to burn more on private lands has been lacking.
In Pennsylvania, most burns are conducted by the Pennsylvania Game Commission. Fire is used to create and maintain habitats for both game and non-game species. The crews that conduct these burns are well trained and will do a walkthrough of the unit prior to burning. Then, the fire is ignited in specific areas so that wildlife has an escape route. Fire has been a natural part of our ecosystem since the very beginning. Many species of trees and grasses have developed systems to resist, evade, or endure the effects of fires.
We're standing actually next to a prairie with some scattered trees on Penn State University's Arboretum property. And so this site is actually burned about every 2 years to maintain this open understory of grasses and wildflowers that benefit from burning. And even the scattered trees, those are white oaks and hickories, are very tolerant of fire and persist in this environment that's burned very frequently. But it maintains this open structure and provides a lot of pollinator habitat for butterflies and other wildlife that depend on it.
Prescribed burns do pose some risks that burn bosses have to carefully consider. Should a burn escape the intended perimeter and start a wildfire, it could cause a lot of damage. For this reason, prescribed burns are done under specific weather conditions to ensure that they are low intensity, slow burning, and continuously under control.
Some of the more probably common or familiar weather parameters that a burn boss would look at would be range of air temperatures, relative humidity, wind speed, and wind direction to help control both the intensity, the direction, and rate of spread of a fire to ensure that it's safely but also effectively implemented. Okay. Another thing is how long has it been since precipitation, because the moisture in the fuels is going to be an important component, whether it's too dry to burn, or often what's more commonly a concern is it's just too wet to burn. Even if you burn, you may not be able to meet your objectives.
While keeping the fire under control is a primary goal during a prescribed burn, there is another significant concern that must be considered.
Another risk to prescribed burning is actually the impacts of smoke. And so it's important for burn managers and burn bosses to be able to use specific weather prediction parameters to help ensure that smoke gets up into the atmosphere and disperses, so it alleviates impacts particularly on adjacent communities. For example, this Arboretum prairie that's burned, we're in State College Borough, and the campus is right over that hill, and so it's always an important factor in burning this particular site to ensure that smoke gets up and out and doesn't impact roads or adjacent communities.
While meteorologists often use the term to describe the dangers of a severe weather setup, when it comes to smoke plumes, instability is a good thing.
The more stable the atmosphere is, the more likely that smoke from a fire will just move horizontally and settle down onto the ground, which can be a risk or a hazard when burning. And so having some instability in the atmosphere will help that smoke column move up into the atmosphere and disperse. It's really important that burn bosses and prescribed burn managers utilize specifically fire weather forecasts that are put out by the National Weather Service that have specific indices that are related to atmospheric stability and, for example, mixing height, how high smoke would be anticipated to rise.
Fire is a tool that's been widely used by humans to meet many land management objectives for thousands of years. The The suppression and exclusion of fires in our forests have led to the increased risks and higher severity fires, particularly out west.
On the increase of fuels and density of forests that have actually resulted in exacerbating a lot of the fire hazards that we have out west and the severity of fires that do burn. And so there's a recognition to use prescribed fire more as a fire hazard mitigation tool because we understand it's one of the most effective and economical tools that we can use to help mitigate catastrophic and high severity wildfires, even in places such as California.
Pennsylvania agencies, including the Game Commission and the DCNR, recognize that this is a way to restore and protect our natural forests. And they rely on the National Weather Service meteorologists to keep fires slow, small, and safe. So next time you look up and see a smoky spring sky, it might not be cause for concern. It could just be a prescribed burn, designed to increase habitat health and keep us all a little bit safer in the long run. For Weather World, I'm Andrew Pizzuto.